A lot of players know that the Huntress has a very questionable morality, since she takes the life of anyone who dares enter her territory, as well as whatever she does to the little girls she steals from the villages as daughters. However, have you ever wondered what she does with the bodies left after all the carnage? Does she clean up? Or does she let the forest take its curse? Well, there's nothing in her map or her base cosmetics that hint at the Huntress eating humans as part of her diet. Nothing except one cosmetic that many players would ignore. The Mordeo is a legendary skin for the Huntress inspired by the Crypt TV horror show from the episode of the same name. Mordeos are demons that are created when a person consumes human flesh. This information is not that weird when you take the Mordeo as a character straight from the show. However, there is one detail that makes this legendary skin completely different from the rest. For the vast majority of legendary skins, like the Minotaur, the Ferryman, or the Luxie, these are all characters themselves instead of cosplays. But this is not the case for the Mordeo. Unlike the rest, Mordeo is not a character. The Mordeo is something overimposed over the normal Huntress, and for something you won't be able to see ever, the devs decided to add a special texture for her, which shows how the Huntress is taken over by dark veins. And this discovery gives a very interesting new meaning to this skin. We know that various cosmetics in DbD are taken from other multiverses, and some others are taken from clothes found in the realm. Would the Mordeo suggest that at some point, in one multiverse, the Huntress decided to not let the meat of her victims go to waste, which made her convert into the Mordeo demon species? What killer gives the most pain to survivors inside a trial? For many, being infected and weakened by the plague's Vale seems like one of the worst pains you could endure as a survivor, as instead of a quick death like the hillbilly's chainsaw could provide, you have to endure the constant pain and nausea while repairing generators, and also endure how your body is slowly rotting, which could take a long time in agony. Another character that can contaminate survivors is the Nemesis, but his virus doesn't seem to give any severe effects to the survivors. However, a virus that does give very uncomfortable side effects is the Ouroboros from Wesker. From the outside, this infection seems to cause survivors to feel weaker than usual, to the point that a full infection allows Wesker to instantly grab you, as well as make you run slower. You can also visually see the Ouroboros tendrils growing around your survivor, but it's when you look inside when you realize the true horrors of being infected with the Ouroboros, as you can see the living tendrils constantly moving inside your survivor's body, twisting your organs in unnatural ways. End Transmission is one of my favorite original DLCs, and the universe that Behavior created for it is really interesting. Not much is known about the universe where Gabriel comes from, but what we do know is that the Huxley Company is morally evil for present standards. Many players are aware that Gabriel Soma is not a full human being. Instead, Gabriel is a clone like the rest of his crew, genetically designed in order to work for the company since birth, and with fake memories implanted on them so they believe that they had a real life before working for the company. Some items are given to the clones so they do not believe their memories are fake. Various of those fake memory items end up being stolen by the Singularity, who for some reason knows that the crew are clones, as in his Soma family photo add-on, we can see him mocking Soma for it. But for Gabriel, he doesn't know. All his memories for him are real. Everything happened, and he believes it with all his soul. Gabriel has not lost hope because he has to survive in order to go back to his imaginary parents. In one of the marketing posts for this DLC, we can hear the last message Gabriel left to his family.
This is for the company. This is for my parents. Mom, Dad, Gabe. Something happened.
Now, imagine for a second that there is a good ending for the universe of DbD. Imagine that the entity is defeated and it no longer exists. All killers are banished forever, and all survivors return back to their original universes. For many of them, this would be wonderful news, like for Meg, who will be able to go back and take care of her grandmother, or for Michaela and Sable, who will return to Greenville together again. But for Gabriel, even at best, he has nothing. No mother, no father, no family. Only a company where he is just another asset. A company that doesn't care that he is stuck forever on a dangerous planet. In a past video of mine, I have talked about how the maps in Dead by Daylight are potentially organic, and everything you can touch, like the pallets you throw, as well as the floor you stand in, is the entity. This can be seen extremely well in maps like the RPD, where the entity goop has taken over various of the walls and floors of the police station in a very aggressive way, never seen before on another map. But lately, this aggression by the entity is significantly stronger. It seems like every new map that is released, we can see the entity's influence on it even more. On the Undead Borgo map, we can see that the entity goop has taken over some of the walls of the castle, as well as part of the walls of the killer shack. We know this is indeed the entity goop thanks to the game files indicating that this texture makes a reference to the entity. Perhaps the most surprising one, at least in my opinion, is found on the newest map, Greenville Square. Instead of the entity manifesting into a bright yellow goop like the Blight Serum or the Pustula Flowers in the cinema, the entity is manifested as meat for the first time, which again, we can confirm this is the entity because of the game files. And by far, the most visually interesting entity influence can be seen on the Nostromo map. Found only in a limited part of the ship, we can see a bunch of entity goop scattered near the control panels of the secret room. But if you look up in the sky, you can see an entire planet being taken over by the entity's influence. An entire planet overpowered by the entity's spider-like webs. Think about this the next time you claim that Myers can defeat the entity with his store-bought kitchen knife. You are probably aware that the icon for the Dead Dog Saloon offering was changed from a hanging noose to a broken bottle. This was done due to the fact that Behavior didn't want to have iconography that is closely related to a certain topic I am not allowed to talk about in this video, but I assume you understand what I imply. However, this was not the first time a change was made in order to prevent sensitive topics from being referenced in the game. The very first was a name change from one of the Legion's cosmetics, the Separation Blade from the Blighted Legion outfit. This outfit is one of the most grotesque that they have, featuring all 4 members of the gang completely fused together into a body horror mess. But the worst part is that all 4 members retained their conscience during this process. They could feel the pain and they could fear. During this process, Joey took a knife in order to attempt and free himself from this cruel fate, but he sadly lost control of his body and his fate was set. This knife, when it was first leaked, was leaked as the Suicide Blade. We know that the entity can go to the far future thanks to taking characters like Ellen Ripley, the Xenomorph, Singularity, and Gabriel. And we also know that it can go to the past thanks to characters like the Plague, Oni, the Knight, and Vittorio. We also know that time doesn't flow the same as in the real world inside the entity's realm, as it doesn't matter where you come from, as a survivor from the future could be older than a survivor from the past. The nurse is one of the killers that served the most amount of time to the entity, for example, unlike the Plague or the Oni, which are significantly older than her in time, and Vittorio has been inside the entity's realm for centuries, as can be seen in his perk Potential Energy, yet he hasn't aged a single year physically. And this brings an interesting question to the table. Since when did the entity exist? Was it always there, from the dawn of time, or was it created later thanks to some type of unnatural force? The answer seems to be even worse than those two, as the entity seems to exist outside of the scope of human time itself. We know that humanity knew about the entity from the past, as the Greeks already depicted entity trials thanks to the engravings on stone that can be found as a charm in the game. But what is more terrifying is that there is also a charm that is dated even older than the one from the Greeks, and that's the Trapper Headstone from the very first rift they ever introduced. According to this charm, it is a Paleolithic slab of stone depicting the mask of the Trapper, and this made me wonder, did our ancestors already know about the entity, and how did they know of the Trapper, a character that is taken from modern times? This, in my eyes, confirms that the entity is omnipresent at all times. This also for me confirms that time in the entity is infinite. You could be hunted or serving the entity for a very, very long time. That time is not a limit for the entity and has never been. Will we get a chapter exploring this prehistoric past at some point? In one of my recent videos, I have talked about the lore of the Plague and how interesting I found it. I always found the idea of the entity manipulating innocent victims into submitting as very dark. Your own actions are not decided by you, as your fate is sealed because an eldritch entity decided so since your birth. For the Plague, it is well known that the entity manipulated her into thinking that it was one of her Babylonian gods, and with her faith so unbreakable, she did everything the entity would order her to do. But this is not about the Plague. Instead, let's focus on the followers of the Plague. The last thing we know is that Adris and her followers decided to do a pilgrimage to the north in order to find a cure. But the effects of the Plague became so strong that they decided to hide inside a cave, and Adris did one last prayer so that the entity helped her and her people. We know that Adris escaped the cave and entered the fog, but we don't know what happened to her followers. In my video, I theorized that her followers were cured of the Plague thanks to this pact that Adris made with the entity. However, we have to take into account that these followers, who already believed in the supernatural, saw with their own eyes how Adris disappeared in front of them, as well as how they were magically cured out of the Plague. And when you take a look at their visual design and the clothing options they choose, it's obvious that they went with capes and hoods in order to hide the scars and defects left by the rot of the Plague. What would these followers do with their new given life? If you know about the lore of the game, you have already linked it. What if the followers of the Plague ended up creating the Black Veil, this cult dedicated to the entity, the same cult that would end up experimenting on the twins and creating some of the offerings we use in-game, the same cult that attacked Elodie while she was trying to investigate and learn about the fog. If this is true, This would significantly increase the impact the plague has done to the universe of Dead by Daylight. This would be the foundation of one of the most mysterious sects in the Dead by Daylight universe. And if you found this theory really interesting, I am sure you will enjoy this fun facts video about the plague as well. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.